Well, a lot of gardeners are fascinated by pottery, and right now we're really going to attempt that fascination in a really significant way. I'm joined by James Barela, who is a potter and a gardener, and you've brought amazing creations with you. Thanks for being on Central Texas Gardener.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, tell me a little bit about the inspiration, because I understand that gardening led you to pottery.
Yes, so my day job, I'm a graphic designer, so I'm on the computer all the time, and I really wanted to get back to making things, being in the garden, working with my hands, and I started getting really involved in gardening, and I really wanted to start working on the pots as well. So originally I started painting them, and then I learned how to make ceramics, and it was all just for the plants.
And you brought your studio supervisor with you. I forgot to mention Luna, and she's a source of inspiration and companionship when you're working on all these creations.
Yeah, she's there with me. She watches the whole process go, and she keeps me company in the studio during those long hours. So I thought I'd bring her along.
We've been doing the show for 30 years. You may be our first feline guest. That's all right, though. And I want to introduce some of your work directly. There's a lovely piece with swirls in it, a tall vase-like thing. But you could use these for planters or for vases, right?
Absolutely, definitely. Yeah. When they have those kind of swirls, that's because there's a mixture of two different clays in there. There's a black clay and a porcelain, and you can kind of mix them together on the wheel, and it kind of creates that marbling effect.
It's beautiful.
So you have to be a little careful with them because the clays dry at different rates, but it's fun to experiment with things like that.
It's a science as well as an art form, really.
Oh
right?
Yeah, and it goes into chemistry as well with the glazing, and you learn about minerals and different types of clays and the earth, so it's really enjoyable.
Well, you know, there's a little bit of science in gardening too, right?
Oh, absolutely, definitely.
Well, I want to show a cluster of all different kinds of pots. A lot of these are all really intended as planters, though, right?
Yes, yeah. Everything I make is pretty much a planter, or I make a few vases as well. So everything's for plants.
And you grow the plants themselves from seed.
Yeah, many of these have been grown from seed. You know, it's a very enjoyable process because you become invested from day one. You watch them germinate, and you get really, you understand their entire lifespan, and you feel really prideful of the things that you make.
Yeah,
so.
There's kind of a personal investment when you plant things from seed. You
know?
Yeah,
definitely.
The fun of babying and nurturing those little sprouts is really cool.
It's harder when you lose them, though, or something like that.
That's true, very true.
But when they go well, it's a really nice thing to have.
Well, I love the forms of the containers. The coloration and the patterning is really nice. I noticed, in particular in the cluster we just looked at, there's a white on white, and it's really about the texture you get from really kind of layering on in a heavy way, almost painted on.
Yeah.
It looks like the glaze.
Well, a lot of it is if you can keep layering these glazes, and during the firing process, and they're fired to about 2100 degrees, that glaze becomes molten, and depending on what type of materials are in that glaze, it'll kind of drip down a little bit. Some will stay still and be static, but sometimes you're just working with what the luck you have in the kiln, and it comes down, and you get kind of a unique piece from that.
Sure. And I forget how hot the kilns have to be, 2100 degrees.
Yeah, and that's
like the surface of the sun in your backyard.
Exactly, and the kilns hold all that temperature really well. You go near it, you don't really feel it that much, but they do go really high, and they go even higher to 2300 degrees. So.
Well, people don't need to have kilns to have fun with this. You brought some pottery, and I understand you actually got started by painting standard pots.
When I didn't have the skills to do that, I know that I really wanted to kind of customize my planters that my plants would sit in, and I started painting them with acrylic paint, and I was really interested in grids at the time and geometry, and I would just kind of make little designs that way on the planter, and you can spray it with some acrylic lacquer, and it'll really set in there.
Yeah, well, you brought along a little selection of those geometric patterns and designs, and they're really fun. I could see myself doing this, which is really great.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable process. You get really invested again in what you're making, and usually I'll have a plant in mind that I want to go in there.
All right. Well, there's another little group of plants on the foreground over here, centered by an agave, one of my favorite plants. They do great in containers.
Absolutely. I mean, they'll do great almost anywhere, but
Yeah,
in a
true.
container, they'll grow, you know, quite well. They'll take as much space as you give them. Really, if you give them a little bit of space, they'll take it that much and grow well. If you give them a lot, they'll also take that.
I like some of these really dark colors as well.
Yeah, the kind of moody sunset type of colors that are in there. I've just been experimenting with different relationships, different glazes, and you really don't know what you're going to get until you put it in that kiln, you open it later,
Right.
and you get it maybe about 24 hours later after it's
Right.
fired, and you realize, oh, this is a success or it's a failure.
All right.
But it's part of the process. It's a lot
Right,
of fun.
right. Well, the clustering of these containers, in a way, I could see collecting these. I do collect pottery, and I just love combining different forms and different colors and seeing how they work together. It's just a great hobby to collect these pieces. Better still to make them.
Yeah.
How long did it take you, by the way, to master this art form?
I actually took a class, an evening class at Laguna Gloria, and it was tough at first because the wheel, these are all wheel made. It fights back with you. It
Oh,
takes
right.
a lot of strength. But you know, it's practice. You know, you just keep
Yeah.
doing it over and over and over, and it becomes second nature. You get that muscle memory, and after a while, you know exactly how to work with the clay.
Great, great. The next group of plants that are containers you brought include a lot with these kind of really significant dripping. And I love the look of those because to me they look like trees.
Yeah, the dripping is because there's different types of, as I said, minerals inside the glazes, and certain glazes tend to drip inside the kiln at a certain temperature.
Yeah.
So you're kind of at the mercy of the kiln to see how it's going to come out in the end. But I like that because every piece is unique. You know, they don't all look the same. All of them have a different type of drip pattern, and
Right.
it feels very special to people when they buy them.
Well, again, the combination of things is really lovely. You have some cacti, some really graceful kind of vine growing down with the little grasping tendrils. This is lovely.
Thank you.
Really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to show some of the colors on some of these as well. This one really speaks to me. This is kind of because it's the color pattern I like to have at home. But tell me a little bit about creating these pieces because it's also a combination of textures on them.
So it's really actually hard to kind of create the pink because it tends to burn off quickly in the kiln. So I did a lot of tests to kind of get to a pink that I like. I like to put them with kind of spiny cacti because it's an interesting combination with these pastel colors and these kind of very kind of fierce looking cacti.
Yeah. Well, and these are obviously designed for growing plants because they do have drainage holes, unlike the vases, but really lovely. And I can't speak enough to how much I love the colors. This one, when we brought it out, I'm going to take away the tag, but when we brought it out, I absolutely was crazy about this particular one, just the colors on it, just really stunning.
I like kind of really bright colors, interesting contrasting colors. Green and red, you know, tends to be very Christmassy, but when you put them in certain shades, they complement each other quite well. But yeah, this is actually one of my tests that I made, and I liked it so much that I just kept it.
Well, absolutely stunning. And this is another one of your plants from seed, perhaps?
This one is actually, I think it's from Bob Barth, who's another
a great
collector.
A great collector,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, there's so much more. We have this lovely hyacinth between us, but what a great pleasure to have you on the program, and thanks for bringing the inspiration. This is terrific.
Thank you so much. Yeah, anyone can get involved in this type of stuff, so I just hope to kind of motivate people to do that.
All right. Well, again, thank you to you and Luna. You've done very good holding court here. She's as happy as she can be and sitting there. So it's been a pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Coming up next, it's Daphne.